I will. Perfect. All right. Hi and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about coping with the stress of graduating. So I'm Maddie Nagel. I am a counseling assistant here at WSU CAPS. I'm also an athletics prac counselor, which means that I spend some of my time working with student athletes here at WSU. As I said sort of before the recording started, if you are hoping to use any of the information from today's presentation for anything other than personal use, or you're interested in getting information for an interview, I recommend that you go to the Cougar Health website and look at our information about requesting an official interview or reaching out to our outreach coordinator, Alina Ohanian. Either of those resources are going to be the best place to get that information. All right. And without further ado, we'll just dive on in. So, come on, computer. Oh, it's not working. Okay. Okay, we're back. Computer crash over. All right, so today we're going to cover a few things. We're going to talk about pre-grad stress, that sort of feeling of the unknown, which I think is where people are probably right now, mid-March, late March. Talk a little bit about post-grad stress, and then we'll talk about some coping skills before bringing it all together. So we are here, so let's start here. Commonly, people before graduation experience a lot of stress related to like the anticipation of this major change. So common sources of pre-grad stress, future career, changes in your family support or your social support as you graduate and leave WSU. Stress about going off to graduate or professional school. I remember that stress very well. And sort of just coping with the general changes and loss that are associated with graduating and moving on. Transition times are a highly stressful part of our lives, and the transition between college and your future career is one of the biggest transitions that most people report for this stage of life. So most often, students report the highest levels of pre-graduation stress related to finances. So things like making enough money in the future and being able to have a financial plan for their future. Also, stress about careers, finding a job where you can make a difference, finding a job that's relevant to the things that you studied in college. And graduating seniors really appear to experience a higher level of stress on average than any other time in college. We often think about graduation as this wonderful time of like transition and celebration, and it is, but it's also, you know, a time of a lot of stress, and it can be sort of hard to acknowledge that you are stressed out amidst all of the celebrating. So let's talk a little bit about post-grad stress. After graduation, there are also quite a few major stressors that you might experience. Some of these probably look a little similar because they're very similar to the things you might be worrying about right now. So firstly, following graduation, students often report a massive decrease in stress and an improvement in general sleep quality. All those sleepless nights you've been having for the last 4 to 6 years or more are suddenly replaced with being able to actually get a good night's sleep and not have to worry about exams. But a lot of people also report something called post-graduation depression. So this is not an official or technical term, but it is something that's been reported pretty widely among people who experience kind of that, you know, dip in excitement and motivation following graduation day. So post-grad, a lot of these stressors are pretty similar. Uncertain job markets, lack of motivation, not being sure what your goals really are anymore, feeling like you're being compared to other people who maybe got better jobs, are going to better cities, have better whatever. Also, the change in your social support network as all of your friends go off in different directions, feeling like your social support really isn't as much or enough as it was when you started. Also, student loans. And just sort of the general stress of trying to be a real adult in sort of the uncertainty of the post-grad market. So now that I've scared the crap out of you by listing off a bunch of things that I'm sure you're already stressed about, let's talk about how to deal with them. So what I wanted to spend a lot of my time on today is this concept of cognitive restructuring. Cognitive restructuring is just a really fancy and kind of technical term for thinking about your thoughts and trying to approach them in a more balanced way. Now, often when people first start cognitive restructuring, they might approach it with sort of an all my thoughts are wrong or like a self-gaslighting approach. And I want to say from the get-go that a lot of your thoughts are right. A lot of things are scary and stressful, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are as scary or as overwhelming, or that you can't handle them. And that's really where cognitive restructuring comes in. It's about finding perspective and finding balance and just identifying some places where maybe the shortcuts of logic that you've been using are pushing you into a more anxious or depressed space than you need to be in. So sometimes it can be helpful to reframe some of those really painful thoughts. Not change them or push them aside or beat yourself up for having them, but just slightly adjust them to something that's maybe a little bit more useful and accurate. So the first step is really checking in with yourself. What are you actually telling yourself when you're getting stressed? Now, when I was right before my own graduation from undergrad, I found myself often going in these like cycles of having no idea what I was going to do and ending up with this idea that I was going to live in my car. There was no evidence that that was where I was going to end up if I didn't write a certain essay a certain way or do things a certain way, but that was what I was convinced was going to happen. So check in on yourself with whether or not you're using a few things that might be an indicator that these are thoughts that are not the most accurate or the most helpful. Things like should, must, or have to. I should be feeling this way. I should be doing this. I have to do this or else. See if want to makes more sense. Do you really want to be doing something, or is there some kind of actual rule that you should be doing a certain thing? You know, there are plenty of things that you have to do pre-graduation. You probably have to fill out some forms. You probably have to find a place to live. But a lot of other things like finding a job, even, you know, all of the different things that you might have put on your list as have-tos, maybe they're really want-tos, and see if that reduces some of your stress when you don't have time or energy to do those things. Also check in on terms like always or never. So things that we often will label as absolute, constant, might really be flexible. We might feel like, well, people never stay friends after graduation. That's a very strong statement to tell yourself. And there's plenty of evidence that that isn't true. So those kind of statements can often also be helpful to check in on. I'm going to put in a plug here for a free app that I personally really like and use with most of my individual therapy clients. This is an app called Fear Tools. It's a companion app called Mood Tools. Fear Tools is focused on anxiety. Mood Tools is focused on depression. They're basically the same app. One is green, one is blue. The Mood Tools app has a little bit more information about like managing self-harm thoughts. Fear Tools has a little bit more about managing anxiety and challenging yourself to do the things that you're afraid of. But overall, both apps are really amazing. And both apps contain a really cool interactive thought journal that you can use to do some of this cognitive restructuring on your own. I will say, obviously, an app is not a replacement for individual therapy. So if you are finding yourself having a hard time restructuring these thoughts, having a hard time coping with some of this anxiety, sometimes having a professional in the room to work through these things with you is the best move. But I do think that these apps are really helpful if this is something that you want to do kind of on your own at first. So let's talk a little bit about what cognitive restructuring actually looks like. So here we have what we call an ABC worksheet. So I will say activating event is a very dramatic term, but it starts with A, so that's why it's activating event and not like stimulus or trigger. So that way it actually says ABC when we look at the worksheet. So the first stage is sitting down and checking in about like, okay, I got anxious, what happened? So step one, activating event. I have an example in here. So in my example, the activating event is that a friend texted me about my post-grad plans. So that text came in and I felt a surge of anxiety. So what was going through my head? Well, I immediately thought to myself, I'm never going to get a good job. And I thought, they're not going to stay friends with me after we graduate. So then what happened? Well, I immediately got anxious. I immediately got sad. And I felt kind of angry at myself for feeling these things. So I stopped texting back and I cried. Now, just laying this out in this manner is the first step. You might notice that some of these things might bring up additional beliefs. So maybe, you get angry at your friend and that becomes your activating event. And then you notice beliefs coming up about, I shouldn't get angry at them for my own fear. I shouldn't be angry at anyone for, not being friends with me after we graduate, or frustration with ourselves for, being anxious about this, or frustration with ourselves for not having a job yet. So all of those things, this is sort of a cycle, but the ABC worksheet can be a nice way to kind of go through and start identifying what's actually happening in the moment between that trigger and the anxiety, the sadness, the fear, the anger, whatever it is. But just laying all these things out isn't really a restructuring, it's just identifying, right? So restructuring comes when we stop and take a long, hard look at the beliefs that we're actually writing down. So the first step is ask yourself what evidence you have that the beliefs are accurate. So the first belief there, I'm never going to get a good job. My evidence for is that I currently don't have a really good job for post-grad. But evidence against, plenty of people who graduated from this program do get good jobs. There are jobs out there that I found and applied for, I just haven't heard back yet. You start kind of building your evidence for and against. And then start brainstorming what kinds of things could you tell yourself in the future. Maybe your alternate statement isn't, I'm going to get a good job. Sometimes flipping 180 is a little intense and not super believable. Maybe your alternate statement for now is, I'm anxious about getting a good job, but all I can do is try. It feels a little bit more balanced. It feels a little bit more accurate. And it isn't fortune telling that you are already doomed just because you feel anxious about what's happening. There are also all kinds of stress management techniques you can use if you're not having enough time or mental energy to challenge every single one of those anxious thoughts. Because like I said before, we can challenge thoughts for sure, but there are a lot of very stressful things that are happening both pre and post graduation that we can't just talk ourselves out of, right? You are going to experience stress and anxiety, and that's kind of part of the human condition. I'm sorry. So what do you do when you start feeling stressed or anxious or overwhelmed? There are quite a few really awesome breathing techniques that can help if you're feeling really anxious in the moment, that can help reduce that automatic physical anxiety that you might feel. So something like square breathing, which is a technique where you breathe in for a count of like 4 or 5, hold your breath for a count 4 or 5, breathe out, same time frame, hold, breathe in, and it creates kind of a square. In, hold, out, hold. And this really helps convince your body that you are not, running away from a bear. you are in fact able to breathe calmly and evenly, and it really helps soothe and bring down that immediate stress. Similarly, something like paced breathing, so keeping your breathing in a calm, slow rhythm, can also help sort of reset your brain and remind your body that you're safe. Similarly, mindfulness techniques can be very, very helpful. CAPS actually has a mindfulness group that runs almost every semester. That's one of my favorite things we do here. But mindfulness is really a practice not of like meditating and becoming, a perfectly enlightened human being, but really of checking in with yourself and being in the present moment. Anxiety often pushes you so far into the future that you sort of forget what's happening in your real life. You end up so concerned about what's going to happen 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years from now that you lose sight of what's happening right here, right now, right in front of you. So personally, I really love mindfulness activities like the leaves on a stream exercise, where you imagine your thoughts sort of floating past, just kind of practicing letting go and being present. Or a body scan, where you just breathe and pay attention to what's happening in your body physically. There are also some really cool meditations, like loving kindness and compassion meditations, that can be really useful for practicing a little bit of forgiveness and compassion towards yourself as you're going through a really stressful time. There's really, really cool new evidence that loving kindness and compassion meditation can actually dramatically reduce symptoms of depression and anxiety by improving self-compassion and compassion towards others. Sort of that everything I need to know I learned in kindergarten approach of really, if you're nice to yourself, good things follow. But if you are feeling really, really overwhelmed and breathing's not really working and your brain is not really in a place where you can sit and meditate, there are also some skills you can use for that in the moment crisis response when you're really, really distressed. So the acronym for distress tolerance skills is TIPP, T-I-P-P. The first is temperature. So bless you. So allowing yourself, so sometimes you can use temperature to sort of shock your body back into paying attention to what's happening with you. So if you've ever been really overwhelmed and splashed cold water on your face, or you've stepped outside, like overwhelmed at like a party, and you've stepped outside and into the cool air and felt your entire body relax, that is a really excellent way to just in the moment activate some of those basic primal responses to changes in temperature. You can also use like intense exercise, so run around if you aren't in a place where you can like go for a long walk. A friend of mine recently mentioned that their therapist recommended flopping around in their bed like a fish if they couldn't get up and walk around. Whatever you can do to exercise works. It doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be actual like, doing push-ups or any kind of strong exercise, but moving your body can help release some of that anxious energy. Also, one of the P's in TIPP is paced breathing. So practice those breathing skills. And then lastly, you can try something called progressive muscle relaxation, where you work through muscle pairs and tense and relax them in pairs to slowly relax your entire body. One additional thing I put on here is the dive reflex. So this technically goes under temperature, but I like talking about it separately. So I mentioned before that feeling of splashing cold water on your face and feeling just kind of the anxiety roll away. The dive reflex is actually a very, very basic primal reflex that human beings have, which is when we submerge ourselves in water, we prepare to swim. So our heart rate slows down, our breathing slows down, our digestion slows down. So if you submerge your face in cold water, the colder, the more intense this reaction, it can really help stop that strong stress reaction, that strong fear reaction, and really help you kind of check back in with yourself so that you can use some of these techniques that require a little bit more presence of mind. A quick note, if you do have any kind of like heart condition or a tendency to have like full, like intense panic attacks, sometimes the dramatic change of using the dive reflex can cause additional problems. So if you are concerned about that, I would try some of these other techniques first, or be sure to try some of the like that dive reflex technique in a situation where you are safe and there's someone around, just in case something happens. It's rare, but I'm not your physician, so please use responsibly. The last is engaging in self-care. This gets its own bullet point because all the first three are ways to deal with stress when it's already happening. Self-care is a great way to avoid it getting to that point in the first place. So find what things work for you. Self-care is a very, very individualized activity, and it can be really anything. Sometimes doing laundry and cleaning your house is self-care. Sometimes taking a nap and doing nothing is self-care. Right? Whatever it is that makes you feel calm and you feel like you've accomplished something that makes you feel recharged is self-care. I think sometimes we use the term self-care to mean doing something selfish or doing something like eating a lot of food or spending a lot of money. And while those things can be self-care for some people, just treat yourself is not necessarily self-care. There are plenty of things that can be really powerful. Sometimes taking a shower when you're overwhelmed is excellent self-care. So whatever it is that brings you joy and recharges you, that counts. Also, I mentioned that sometimes the transition means losing social support that you had before. So find new ways to build new groups. I know college is amazing. So is life after graduation. You can grieve the loss of those social supports, the systems, the things that you loved, the people that you got to spend every day with, your roommates, if you liked them. I liked my roommate senior year. But you know, grieve the loss of the things that you love, but also find ways to fill those needs in your future life. If you really were super involved on campus and liked helping to support other people, see if you can find ways to become involved in your community. There are plenty of amazing things out there that you can do, and recognizing and identifying what things you're most sad to leave might give you a list of things to build into your new life. I also say that life after graduation is amazing, knowing full well that I'm a fifth-year graduate student and I have not necessarily lived a long life outside of graduation, as I sort of went straight back into school. However, I have it on good authority that life after graduation will be wonderful. Okay. So let's bring it together. I've got 3 minutes left. I'm doing amazing on time. Look at me go. So in sum, graduation is a huge transition, and transitions can be really distressing. We don't really know what's on the other side, and that fear of the unknown often causes a lot of anxiety and worry and pain. But it's not only normal, it's totally okay to grieve the things that you're losing. Just don't let yourself lose sight of all the amazing things that you're gaining on the other side. The most common stressors are career, finances, support, and again, change and loss. Find ways to engage in some of the coping skills. So cognitive restructuring can be really, really helpful through this time. Finding ways to make sure that your internal narrative about what's happening really matches the truth of the outside world. Also, use some of those coping skills like breathing, mindfulness, distress tolerance, and be sure to be nice to yourself over the next few weeks, because it's a stressful time, and nothing that I say in this presentation is going to change the fact that it's stressful. But if you take care of yourself, you'll be able to handle it. And I want to sort of just leave you with the idea that the things that you value right here, right now in college are things that you are going to be able to find out in the outside world. There are still people, there are still organizations, there's still ways to get involved. And even though those things are going to look and feel different, you can still meet your values and get the things that matter to you. It's just going to take a little time and a little effort to find them again. So with that, congratulations. It's okay to be stressed, but also be proud. Here's some resources on campus if you or anyone you know or love needs additional support through this time. Like I said, I'm here at Kluger Health upstairs in counseling and psychological services. We do both counseling and assessment, and we also we're open 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, but we also have an after hours crisis line if anything is happening and you are concerned for yourself or for someone else. But also be sure to check out the Academic Success and Career Center. They're the perfect people to talk to if you're stressed about your future success and career. And if you're experiencing any kind of emergency situation and need additional support, don't hesitate to reach out to the Dean of Students office as well. And here are the very cool people I cited. If you have any questions, you're welcome, like I said, to reach out to Alina, who's our outreach coordinator. You can also email me directly if you have questions about the things that I said. My email is just my first name dot last name @WSU, or you can always reach out to CAPS and they'll help get a hold of me.